Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're thrilled to have you and to really be part of a big announcement. It's our year anniversary, and we're thrilled to be with a great panel and our members who worked really hard with McKinsey partners to talk about net zero heat. And we want to share with you the importance of how long duration energy storage is helping accelerate our energy system to meet decarbonization goals around the world. So thank you again for joining us. We are here live in person at COP27 in Egypt, and we also are excited to have many of you online, and we'll be taking questions from you a little later. There is an app I want to make sure everyone sees for online questions, slido.com. Please use that, and we will make sure that we're focusing on your questions later. So let's get into it. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to go over what the Long Duration Energy Storage Council is. We're going to have a presentation of our new report, Net Zero Heat, and then we're going to have a panel discussion with our experts and our members of the Long Duration Energy Storage Council who worked for thousands of hours on the report, sharing expertise and working with McKinsey on modeling and some very insightful data points we want to share with you. And then we're going to have a panel discussion and then look forward to online questions. Those in the audience today will have discussions afterwards at the reception. And then we'll close with some closing remarks and next steps. So hello, I'm Julia Souder. I'm the Executive Director of the Long Duration Energy Storage Council. And this is, again, our year anniversary. We're thrilled to be at COP27. We launched our Net Zero Power Report at COP26. Many of you were here and in the room, and we've done a lot since then. So today, why should we care about heat decarbonization? And what is flexibility? And how does long duration energy storage fit into the picture? And how relevant is thermal energy storage for you, for us, for our communities? That's what we're really excited today to have an amazing group of panelists to help answer those questions and learn more about our report findings. So thank you, Camilla, for joining us as the CEO from Kyoto. Thank you, Doron from Brenmiller, the Executive Vice President for Commercial Development. Thank you, Tomas, President of Energy from Alfa Laval. And thank you, Godart, Expert Partner from McKinsey. So as I mentioned, we have our year anniversary. When we launched our announcement of being the Long Duration Energy Storage Council at COP26, we had 22 members. And today we have over 60. We're really thrilled to show the importance of long duration energy storage and this unique perspective of bringing together technology providers who are, whether they're in startup phase or whether they're working, have been in the industry for decades, combining their shared expertise with customers, equipment providers, capital providers. The entire ecosystem is coming together to validate the importance of long duration energy storage and keeping this momentum going to show that we're looking at the 4 different types of long duration energy storage. You're looking at mechanical, you're looking at chemical, you're looking at electrochemical, and you're looking at gravity. And so we're really excited to see the thermal energy storage we're going to talk about today and its critical components. We came together as a global secretariat based in Brussels to work for society's benefit, to demonstrate how we can decrease emissions and lower costs for affordable, reliable, clean energy. And as we work together with our diverse membership to really increase this momentum, we're thrilled to demonstrate the enormous value out of long duration energy storage. So, and some of the values that we actually can demonstrate in the value out of long duration energy storage, we really want to highlight energy shifting. We know when the wind shines on and off, the wind blows on and off, the sun shines, for certain hours of the day. But how do we keep this clean energy online? How do we make sure that we have this storage that can provide clean energy every hour of the day, every month, every year? And so long duration energy storage plays a vital role in energy flexibility, providing for those on and off periods, the peak periods, the valleys, to make sure you have this consistent, reliable, affordable power that's provided with long duration energy storage. So we're really excited to see that, with the multi-hour, we're getting the balance of daily load, decreasing renewable curtailment. We're seeing on multi-day, multi-week, how we can avoid grid congestion. And we're also seeing seasonal, that when we have more and more of these climate events and extreme weather events that are affecting us globally, we now have another solution to help mitigate. And long duration energy storage really provides additional grid services, both behind the meter, in front of the meter, both remote, both local, urban, rural, small, large, diversity again of long duration energy storage technologies is really critical. And we're thrilled that you can have long duration energy storage replace a gas plant, to be that base load, to give that security again. And so we're providing again black start capability and many other components that is so critical to meeting our decarbonization goals. And I mentioned that, as we're unlocking these different use cases and really promoting how long duration energy storage provides enormous value in both the power and heat side, we're giving this energy shifting. We're making sure you have clean energy online 24/7 for months, for years, for days. And we're providing, support that helps storage as a transmission asset. We're trying to show that we can support remote or island grids, microgrids. We can have that flexibility provided by long duration energy storage, giving that firm grid reliability that you need with heat and power. Being able to take waste heat or district heating and really put it into this reliable, consistent, affordable energy that you need for producing lots of different, whether it's aluminum or agriculture. We're going to speak more about this and what the report really shows of how critical it is to have long duration energy storage providing both power and heat reliability services. And we're thrilled since our launch a year ago to working with McKinsey partner as our knowledge partner, many reports providing toolkits and fact-based information to share. From building on the Net Zero Power report we demonstrated at that time, it was a $3 trillion marketplace. Moving forward, what we're going to share with you the new insights and modeling that we built upon, the importance of different tools to use. And we built from the Net Zero Power report the 24/7 Clean Power Purchase Agreement, showing that you can take a traditional power purchase agreement and modernize and amplify it to create the certainty to have clean energy every hour of every day. And then we built on this tool showing that globally in various communities, there are various policies that you can adapt, whether it's revenue mechanisms, grid planning, whether it's procurement targets, a carbon tax. There are 20 different recommendations in the policy toolbox that we can take and adapt locally to really ensure that long duration energy storage provides those societal benefits. And today, we're thrilled to launch our Net Zero Heat Report and go into the details about why this is so important, why we should all care about this, and why long duration energy storage as power and heat is so critical to meeting our net zero targets. So I'm going to hand it over to Godart to give a presentation of the findings.
Thank you, Julia. And I'll stand. So Net Zero Heat, as a long duration energy storage council, thinking a year ago, most people were thinking we're really thinking about getting 24/7 renewable electrons through our power systems. And as a council, we came together and thought, no, the problem is much bigger than power, right? We need to electrify everything, but that is also through a power to heat. And heat is twice as much energy as power today. There's such an opportunity to electrify heat. And what is the role of thermal energy storage to make that decarbonization of heat feasible? So let's take you through a few of the findings, and I'll take you one by one through the report insights. So first of all, heat is relevant, right? So we're talking about half of final energy demand being heat-driven. That includes hot and cold. About 40% of emissions related to heating and cooling. So you cannot get to net zero energy without really thinking hard about what's the most efficient way to get to net zero heating. Second, it isn't the case that if you store heat, that you lose a lot of the energy if you then later use that heat. I think that was a surprise to me personally. I thought if you store heat, there's no way you get a good efficiency out. And we see over 97% efficiency round trip of going from power to heat for an ultimate decarbonization of heating application. So third, again a surprise to me, is this isn't about it is economic in 10 years or 15 years after we get the cost down, right? But there are already numerous use cases where this has an attractive IRR, 6 to 28% IRRs, and we'll take you through the individual business cases. And that is in a normal gas price environment, right? We did not take today's gas price and say, hey, there's a business case, right? In a normal gas price environment, we see power to heat storage for heat decarbonization being an economic opportunity. That increases the role of long duration energy storage. So we said last year, we're talking about single digit low terawatts of deployment. Now we're going to 2 to 8 terawatts of deployed long-duration energy storage capacity across power and heat. There's a doubling of cumulative capex now, $2 to $4 trillion between now and 2040 that we see being deployed within long-duration energy storage across heat and power. And for the first time, we have an aggregate global number of what are the savings at a societal level that we're able to draw out of such a technology class. So the long-duration energy storage technology class reduces overall annual costs by $550 billion. So if you think about the $4 trillion you need to invest and this $500 billion of a carrot, you can see that there is, from a society perspective, a real business case to be made to start accelerating deployment and thereby getting more and more renewables into our energy system. First, heat, it's relevant, right? So on the left-hand side, final energy consumption in industry, in buildings, in district heating, we see is 50% related to heating. So really thinking long and hard about decarbonizing heating and cooling needs. We're in Egypt today. Of course, we're enjoying the air conditionings. And in India, other locations, we really see peak demand for heating, for cooling growing. And what is the role of thermal energy storage also for those cooling applications? And we really think about heat broadly across the whole spectrum of hot and cold. Also a driver of CO2 emissions. So heating and cooling, 45% of global emissions, and that excludes the power sector, but it's 45% of the portion that we didn't analyze last year at COP26. So really important to address that big chunk of emissions. How do we do that? First of all, we build a lot of renewables, right? So renewables, wind and solar, introduce variability into our energy system. And how do you then take that variability and meet the needs of society, which is not variable, right? You always want your power, your hydrogen, your heat. So how do you create firm heat, firm power, or 24/7 heat, 24/7 power? So you do that by increasing the flexibility in power, in heat, and in hydrogen. So think of the flexibility in each of these bubbles. You also do it by increasing the integration between power and hydrogen and power and heat. And today we'll talk about that heat storage opportunity, so increasing flexibility in heat, as well as that interaction between power and heat. What we see is that it reduces curtailment. It also allows you to really take a lower system cost perspective by increasing the infrastructure utilization, so transmission utilization by adding flexibility to energy systems. Diving in, again, last year we looked at power long-duration energy storage, so that's the top end of this page. Power long-duration energy storage can be diverse. You have thermal storage, electrochemical storage, chemical storage, mechanical storage, so all forms of storage, but ultimately power is stored for ultimate use as an electron, as power, to create firm power. This year, in our net zero heat report, we look at similarly variable renewable electricity storage in diverse energy media, so as thermal energy storage, and we've looked at all energy media that are available to thermal energy storage for ultimately decarbonization of industry or buildings, the heating needs in buildings, providing firm heat. So not just a heat pump running on renewables that is zero carbon when there's renewables, but a firm heat source 24/7. So we looked, as I mentioned, at all these different technologies. So the technology classes here are sensible heat, latent heat, and thermochemical heat. So these are, and within each of these, there are, again, subcategories of heat storage. And a few questions, and these are myths that we are looking to bust with this report. So first of all, we cover all temperature ranges. This is not, let's say, -30 to 150 degrees Celsius, but it's cooling up to multiple thousands of degrees Celsius that you can achieve with thermal energy storage discharged. You can also not just store it for a day or two, right? You can store it for days, weeks, seasons, right? So, and you can do that, of course, at an efficiency that makes economic sense, right? You don't lose 95% of the energy if you store it over a season. And there are different technologies that solve for these different durations of energy storage. Lastly, these are mature technologies. Not all of them are commercially mature, but it isn't the case that we need to wait another 5 or 10 years before we think about thermal energy storage. These are technologies that are commercially mature today, and you can actually also see progress being made on a number of them over the next years to really get into commercial applications. So what did we do with the council members this year? So we took all of those different technologies, so over around 15 thermal energy storage technologies. We took their CapEx costs, their OpEx costs, their round-trip efficiency costs, very similar to last year, and we developed a benchmark methodology to compare what does it cost to deliver firm heat. So of course you then charge that thermal storage system with electric heating, heat pumps or e-boilers. You store it and you discharge it, and we divided it into different archetypes of applications. So applications of 1 bar saturated steam, or 25 bar saturated steam, or hot air. So all of these different applications of heat have their own storage technologies that can actually meet these needs, and we benchmarked each of these applications to be able to create business cases with real numbers from our council members relevant to these specific industrial applications. And we'll talk about those business cases in just a bit. But I think really exciting, a first time that I know that there's a thermal energy storage benchmark available to be used now by industry as a way to think through their heating decarbonization needs. So what does it tell us? And this is just one of those results. Again, for me, interesting, insightful, new. So on the left-hand side, you can see a 24/7 cost to produce heat with a gas boiler, roughly $40 to $65 per megawatt hour. And then as we move to the right, you can see different decarbonized options. You add CCS, you change your fuel source to hydrogen or biomass, or you take renewables, solar or wind, you store it with a lithium-ion battery, and then you use it as electricity in a heat pump, right? So there's an electric way of going to decarbonized heating. So those are on the left-hand side, and what you can then see here is the comparison between an electric boiler with a lithium-ion battery to a heat pump with a lithium-ion battery, where those are both higher than the thermal energy storage solutions, about 50% lower cost to firm heat with thermal energy storage than to firm heat through an electrical storage technology. And also you can see significantly lower cost to firm heat with thermal energy storage if you compare it to a biomass or hydrogen form of heating. So again, competitive as well to gas, right? So if we look at the right-hand side, 30 to 60 with an electric boiler, 15 to 25 with a heat pump, compared to 40 to 65 with a gas boiler. That includes a CO2 price, and of course will differ depending on which geography and which gas price you are therefore using. But we're not talking about thermal energy storage 24/7 renewable heat as being significantly more expensive than the fossil alternative, but really that there are use cases where we start to, with a reasonable carbon price, be in the money. Important that there are assumptions underneath this, right, as always. So thinking through what is the price you're paying for grid access. Grid access price is really important, and in the report you'll see that we vary grid access price, so what is the capacity charge you pay, and that of course introduces uncertainty and changes to those business cases, and we talk about that in length in the report. I mentioned we went into 4 business cases in detail. A green steam business case, to think a petrochemical location that is looking to green their steam, but it can also be steam used for food processing, right? So 28% of IRR for such a green steam use case. We also looked at district heating, at aluminum refining, at off-grid greenhouses in Africa, and each of these business cases was developed together with the council members. So this wasn't us sitting in a room, ivory tower, developing the business case and hoping we're right? This was us sitting down with each of those council members and with their technical team saying, what if this technology is used in your setup? How would that look like? What if you're paying for your grid in a particular manner? What would that look like? So it's really exciting to see that these are now industry-backed business cases that are now useful for us now to assess how thermal energy storage can unlock decarbonized heat. Much more detail again in the report. I will not go in there now. So what does it then do in terms of our understanding of flexibility in power systems, or flexibility in power systems, right? So we use the same McKinsey power model that we used last year for our net zero power report. But now instead of just using power storage technology, we added thermal flexibility to the model. And we looked at, so then in a solar-heavy system, in a wind-heavy system, in a system with both wind and solar, how much storage technology do we see being built? So we see capacity normed at 100. 100 is, let's say, how much lithium-ion is built in 2040 in our model, and you can see that if you add power long-duration energy storage technologies, there's already an increase of 30 to 60% of the amount of flexibility capacity you're building in these power systems. If you add both archetypes, so power and thermal energy storage, to these different archetypes of power systems, you go to a 2 to 3 time increase in the amount of flexibility that you're building. So you can see that there is a combination of power and thermal energy storage that really most optimally solves for the net zero energy transition within these energy systems. So I think, again, for us, it was a question around, okay, do we see competition between thermal energy storage and long duration power storage, right? Will we see one taking away market for the other? And the answer is a resounding no. We see them as complementary, and actually that the total size of the long duration energy storage market only grows with the inclusion of thermal energy storage. So if we then look about the total deployed capacity, so it's on the power storage. So this is, again, electrons stored as a electrochemical, mechanical, chemical, and then back as an electron, about 1.5 to 3 terawatts of deployed capacity. Adding in thermal energy storage, another 1 to 5 terawatts of capacity, getting us to a total of 2 to 8 terawatts of deployed long duration capacity between now and 2040. So this is a significant deployment, even on the scale of wind and solar, which are, of course, massive industries to get us to net zero. We did the math with 2050 IEA numbers. We're talking about 35% of wind and solar deployment would be the equivalent capacity on the LDES side. So we're not as big as wind and solar combined, but I think it's one of those hidden gems in the energy transition, that this sector really is one that can make the energy transition affordable, reliable, and clean. It's an investment of 2 to 4 trillion. So we had a financing group earlier today here at COP27, and therefore there's a real need for capital deployment around these technologies to make these projects come off the ground. If we then talk about savings, right, there's the lower end of the 2 and the higher end of the 8 terawatts, and we see that savings in the higher end of deployment reach up to $540 billion of system savings per year, right? So again, for us, this was the first time we quantified the cost reduction at a societal level from reducing curtailment or redispatch in power systems, reducing fuel costs by being more efficient in your deployment of power capacity in energy needs, and reducing the infrastructure costs, being able to more efficiently use transmission and distribution, not build transmission that is poorly utilized, but really baseload that energy for heat and power purposes through those transmission lines. And again, 540 billion compared to that trillion plus, about 2 to 4 trillion needs. So, I mean, in short terms, I would say it's something like an 8-year payback for the total deployed capital in long-duration energy storage from a societal perspective. Of course, the math for a bank doesn't quite work that way, but as a society, as we sit here at COP27, I think important to take that macro perspective into account. So that's, in short, the introduction to the report. I'm very excited about heat and being able to lift the veil on such an important part with the Council, and looking forward to the panel.
Thank you, Godart. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And again, thank you to McKinsey and all of our members that are here today in the audience and online for all your hard work of making this come to life, being able to share these amazing components about how important it is to have long duration energy storage to firm energy and firm heat. I mean, there's so much value add in the capacity, the cost savings. I mean, there's so much here, but I'm so curious, Camilla, what were your own personal takeaways when we published the report? Did you have an aha moment that you were really excited to see or that caught you off guard?
I think for us working in this, it's no surprises, but it's really nice to see it being consolidated in such a good way, and see the details and the numbers being worked through so thoroughly, so that we can share this storage in such a credible way, because it is really an opportunity to accelerate the energy transition. And you called it a hidden gem, Godart, and it's a pity that it is, because we need to make this known. Right. So that is really a big day today to be able to do that.
I like that we're changing the dialogue and really capturing the moment to present the enormous value added. And Doron, what was anything that caught you off guard, or that you really want to make sure the audience hears of the value of thermal energy storage?
Well, I think the first thing that's also, I think the first point that Godart mentioned is the existence of the report and the focus that we need to give to this huge segment. I mean, it's the single largest segment of energy production, of emissions, and up until today, it wasn't something people are talking about. So I really hope that this report and what we are doing here and now is going to start a change from talking about renewables and batteries and other storage technologies to talk about first heat and then solutions to decarbonize heat and talk about solutions, as Godart said, that are here today, and not only solutions like hydrogen that are still, you know, we still need to get there in terms of maturity and cost, and I think the report showing those things is the most important part, even before we start reading the first sentence that is written there. So this is, I think, a very big milestone in this segment that we all work in.
Yes, I like that. It's the beginning of a really significant milestones that we continue to build upon to get the pathway to building on the existing technologies that are available in the marketplace today on thermal energy storage, which I think is really important to make known and to build upon. And Tomas, why is heat decarbonization so important to your company and to you?
Yeah, I think when we were in Glasgow last year and we launched the net zero power, it was obvious for everybody we also need to talk about the net zero heat. And it's when we talk about the electrification of systems, we are heavily involved in replacing gas and oil boilers at homes, right? So there are 150 million boilers at home in European households, and that is actually happening now. And we see a lot of low waste heat being taken care of also. But the industry heating, that's really a blind spot today. And I think now we are really getting that on the agenda, and we are getting technologies and solutions in place that can really make that happen as well. And that is such a big part of the whole decarbonization. 70% of the industry's heat are coming from fossil fuel today. So we have to replace all those oil and gas boilers also in the industrial sector.
Right.
And I think this is what this is about.
And your point about local homes, communities, what we're doing there, the transitions of moving away from fossil fuel in your homes and your communities, but also industry. I mean, there's so many parts of the economy that are affected by heat and the importance of moving forward. Godart, when you presented the business cases and building on the different points you've heard from our members, you know, was there a surprise in the business cases that came to you that you wanted to say, I want to amplify this message, or I'm curious, like, I was surprised by these 4 different scenarios that are happening that we can make real tomorrow?
Yeah. So I think one is, as you're a consumer of energy, make sure that you look at both your power consumption and your heat consumption. And then as you think about meeting that energy need, whether it's, let's say, buying a contract from your utility or working with a renewable developer, make sure that you size the need of that energy need to that full heat and power consumption. So if I reflect on, for example, a consumer that has land available in an attractive location with solar or wind, just building solar 3 times bigger than you would have, because you can not just decarbonize your power needs, but also your heat needs. I think that that's the opportunity. So I also tell renewable developers, want to think through how you can triple the size of your business. It's think about power and heat rather than just power.
Yep. Thank you. And I think that the different economies, whether it's the aluminum or steel or agriculture, you know, there are all these different avenues to talk about how long duration energy storage provides that value add and gives that flexibility. But we're so excited about this and we're thrilled to talk about it, but there are some barriers and challenges that we need to make sure that we start breaking down and really providing the real solutions of thermal energy storage. Doron, what would be one of the challenges that you see we need to address today?
I think that, you know, looking back at the last 10 years of working, you know, in this field, one of the biggest challenges or barriers that we tackle is getting through the customers. First, again, explain why heat, why we need to decarbonize, why it's also a big contributor to your overall CO2 emissions, but then to convince industrial players to put new technologies into their sites, into their industries. They see very high risk in it. And you really have to scale up the technology enough and, to make them comfortable. And the first ones to convince to go ahead and install our projects, and we have a few projects we just commissioned, our first projects actually in the last 2 years, we've been working very hard to get these guys convinced, and only the top tier of those risk takers were willing to give us a chance and implement our technology. I hope this will change now and they will see some acceleration once the technology is more mature. But this indeed, I think, was of the biggest challenge to convince them to have this conservative industry say, I'm going to put something in my backyard that's going to replace what I'm doing for the last 50 or 100 years, my boilers, with something different. It's a huge challenge, and I think, and I hope that we'll start to see more and more companies saying, okay, I'm willing to take some risk. First, there are available technologies, but if I want to keep decarbonizing, if I want to get to net zero, I can't continue to do what I did. I have to do something new. I have to try. And even if I fail sometime, I can try. And I think with thermal energy storage, you can also start small and try. That's a big advantage. You don't have to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to test if something is working. You can put $1, $2, $3, $5 million and see it working. And I think this is a very important point. And I hope more and more industries will start to see this report and see what we are doing and go ahead and implement.
I like how you're mentioning de-risking and really trying to put it out there that we have technologies that are there, but the economics are proven too. And so really trying to share the information of the cost savings. I mean, $540 billion annually, that's a lot of money. Yeah. And so I think as we try to really amplify that you're getting a lot of benefit for society and for so much more to your communities is really important. But Camilla, are you seeing additional challenges or barriers that can build on that we need to address or highlight?
Yeah, so the uncertainty in the energy market, no one knows what will the energy market look like in the future, and that makes it a bit difficult for industrial leaders and investors to actually take the investment. So addressing that from a policy level will be very helpful. But a message, going back a bit to amplifying messages, I think half of the process heat in the industry is not hard to abate. Half of the process industry is easy to abate, and technology is available, and it's competitive. So there is no waiting. It is time for action. So, and I think the geopolitical situation provides an opportunity that is fueling those solutions. So supporting that from an uncertainty point of view, from a policy level, and making it known that technology is available, which is what we are doing today, is probably the two most powerful.
And Tomas, building on the energy security component as an ongoing conversation with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how does thermal energy storage and long duration energy storage play in advancing global energy security concerns?
I think it's an important element there. I mean, like I gave the examples with the homes, the industries are having the same challenges. So, but replacing a boiler, it's impossible with renewable without storage. So I think that is part of that whole game. And also to Godart's point with this optimizing your power and heat, there's also so much waste heat that can be collected and put into storage and then used when needed. So you don't have to buy as much power in the beginning as you originally were doing. So I think there's a lot of optimization doing there in the whole energy balance of a plant. And that's where I also think an opportunity is, of course, getting this much more awareness, but also having industrial partners speaking together and combining solutions to make the round-trip efficiency even better and make the CapEx, OpEx even more optimized and so on. So on the industrial side, I think we can also do a lot. But of course, policymakers also making the long-term perspective and making the risk, like you mentioned, less of a hurdle.
Just to add on that, I think we were sitting in an interesting discussion yesterday, and we said, in looking at COVID, the humanity did something amazing. We developed a vaccine in 2 years, and usually it takes 15 years to do that. So can we implement the same thing that we did there to our sectors? And I think that the crisis today in Europe can do exactly that, because it's not just, okay, let's gradually meet our targets, let's just gradually implement new things. It's now we need other solutions. We need them fast. We need them to keep warm this winter, not in 5 or 10 or by 2040. So I really hope that this, what we see now, will help accelerate the transition and the adoption of these type of technologies the same way that we see with vaccination for COVID.
Thank you for weaving this back in, because I want to come to you, Godart, on COP27. But I think that the themes that you're speaking to is how long-duration energy storage can de-risk the transition, how power and heat are critical for grid reliability, stability, resiliency, and that firming that we need to keep the lights on and keep the heat in the homes. And so, you know, as we have climate discussions here at COP, Godart, how does long-duration energy storage technologies, both power and heat, fit into the discussion? And how can we help, you know, create the policies today so we're addressing climate change goals?
Yeah, I think, so my belief is that you have an energy transition constrained by infrastructure today. So just the speed with which you can connect renewables is a almost limiting factor in how quickly we can decarbonize our energy system. And long-duration energy storage, the analogy I use for it is it's a bit like a sponge, right? And you can decide where you put the sponge in an energy system and what type of sponge you want to use, right? So if you have renewables somewhere, you just don't have the infrastructure, but you have a need for energy, just put the sponge in place. You can build as much renewables as you want until that supply meets the demand. And I think it's quite a unique tool that you have long-duration energy storage to almost reduce the constraints in infrastructure to still accelerate renewables build-out, right? So it's, I'm a person that likes analogies, as you know, Julia. So the other, I say, is long-duration energy storage is a bit the anti-cholesterol of the transmission system, right? So you put it in and all of a sudden things flow again, right? And I think that's the long-duration energy storage in a transition that is bottlenecked by infrastructure is critical. And one of the cool things is that it can be built in a year, right? So these are not necessarily projects that take 5 or 10 years. Like it's almost as simple as building a small solar farm or a small battery. Like it doesn't take years. It's actually a year and you're done. So one of the things that I'm telling my industrial clients is you've got high prices next year, winter. Make the decision today. By next winter, you've got something to abate your high gas costs with, right? These are not multi-year long projects. So that's another, I think, benefit of LDES. This is not a future music, but really there today.
No, and thank you for highlighting that. And your analogies are always great because it's a good visual. And I like how the sponge could be adapted both in urban, rural, on-grid, off-grid, remote. I mean, I think that demonstrates the flexibility of long-duration energy storage, and again, that importance of the power and heat sector. And we're getting some great questions from the audience. I want to jump here and come back to some other ones. But so could you discuss how you took into account the effect of grid flexibility on the business case for customers using thermal storage, such as reduction in demand charges, revenue or cost savings from demand response, or other grid services?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think we've seen in the past also with battery storage that value stacking is always the way to get to the economics of this type of projects. And of course, thermal energy storage is not just providing clean heat, it's also providing, it can provide other services. Exactly, I think like Godart said, if there are areas of excess renewables, taking loads off the grid is as important as bringing them back on the grid. We've seen this in places in the world when the grid collapsed, when there was too much renewable generation at the same time. And as a result, it's also becoming economic to provide these services of capacity and energy, which is we are reducing. And then we also get our fuel, which is electricity in most cases, very cheaply, which makes the economic case even stronger. So I think that for sure thermal energy storage will play a significant role also in grid support and grid services, and also reduce the costs of grid connection in many projects. It will have a strong economical impact, which is not less, even sometimes more than selling the thermal energy.
Camilla, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the way it was done in the report was quite nice. You will see two cases. One case which is based on the electricity market today, where it's basically load shifting that is paying the business case. And in some markets, you have some flexibility markets, so you get some cash flow. So, but that's basically the two cash flows you have today. And you will see that in the report, and then you will see an upside, how it might evolve, where storage might get some, and most likely will get some value in the future. And of course, the CO2 and what potentially could come. So I think that way of looking at the business case is quite fair. Then you look at it in the current market and what we believe it will evolve into.
And I like how you're weaving together, the markets today and how we need and must have them evolve as we have this climate-dependent generation and how it affects what we can do, and on the other side of the system, providing this flexibility and this need. That I'm curious, Tomas, do you want to add anything to kind of why the business case makes sense to you and why this is important?
Yeah, I think compared to the net zero power we launched last year with the whole utility grids and so on, there's much more complexity there with the permits, with the grid deals and so on. I'm quite hopeful that this is, when you come down to a specific industry, a certain plant and so on, that the business cases can be a bit faster, to be honest.
Scale, but the savings today, do you want to expand upon that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think when you look at that slide, you can ask yourself a question, okay, if it's that simple, why doesn't everyone do it, right? So what's the issue? And I think one of the questions is grid charges, and what's the appropriate level of a grid charge for a variable load versus a base load, right? Because if you have a variable load that charges at times when actually the grid appreciates that load charging and discharges, or at least doesn't charge at other times, right? That is actually a real benefit to the grid. At the moment, that's, let's say, it isn't always a differentiated price that you pay for a variable load versus a base load. You may even look, and I know that this is a discussion in hydrogen, right? So what's the right capacity payment for an electrolyzer, right? So, and similarly, you could ask yourself the question, what's the right capacity payment for a thermal energy storage or a power energy storage system, right? So because a grid charge being high or low is a difference between an investor having an attractive IRR and a low IRR. So it's a really determining factor. You may also start to get the market off the ground with some type of temporary, let's say, duration that you don't have grid charges at a particular level just to get us going. And then over time, you reintroduce grid charges as per normal, right? So that it doesn't become a forever intervention, because the grid also needs to be paid for, right? So I understand why the grid charges are there. But that's at least one of the reflections I have. Grid charges is the one that determines whether those IRRs are attractive or whether you're actually struggling.
And this is something that we could change today to make this work for thermal energy storage and really amplify the benefits that could be seen. So that's an exciting action item to be taken away.
And in the meantime, right, there are those that are doing behind the meter installations, where just like today, the question of came through, people do behind the meter to arbitrage a bit on those grid charges. Similarly, behind the meter installations, of course, don't have to face that grid charge, and you can already solve for it quite quickly.
And to those of you who are joining us online, we'd love to take your questions. We're looking at them right now, and when you signed in, there was a Slido app, so if you want to click on the link, we can see your questions and bring them live to the panel. So thank you for those who are submitting them. Another question for the audience is, let's see, what do you think about the regeneration of only one type of energy, electrical? In a crisis energy situation of the transition period, this type of energy completely excludes thermal release. Do you agree?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Or rephrase it?
I think it really gets to is any type of crisis, and whereas we're trying to firm the energy and provide that, the thermal energy storage, focusing on heat and power, but, is there any way that we can maybe make sure we're not excluding one type? We're not excluding thermal. We're not excluding electrical. How do we bring more?
Maybe I can at least take a pass, right?
Yeah.
I hope it answers the question. But what we have tried to do with the council is really think about how does long duration energy system flexibility integrate renewables into dispatchable power, heat, and hydrogen, right? Really thinking about the energy system needs long duration flexibility. Then what is the cost of providing flexibility either through demand side flexibility, through transmission build out, through thermal flexibility, through different forms of power system flexibility, or through hydrogen turbines. I mean, there's all ways you can solve for flexibility. Some flexibility only solves for 2 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, week, right? So each of those, we call them the cost curves for different durations with different technologies. And therefore, it is going to be a whole mix of solutions, not just power or thermal. And ideally, you would maximize the cheapest forms of flexibility to reduce the cost of the energy system.
And maybe as a continuation of that it's also important that we are technology neutral because there are so many different applications, and we cannot. Energy storage for many years was just about batteries, right? I mean that has changed now after last year, but we have to continue that also on the heat side. There are so many different applications, and now when the heat and power and hydrogen get so integrated, and there are now also intersector technologies available for making all that happen, there are many more microsystem opportunities and giving an enormous amount of flexibility, which
I'm so glad, Tomas, you brought up the interconnected natureness of this. It's so important to look at how every part of the ecosystem is tied together and how we need that diversity, because it's not the same solution for every community. We have the diversity through all the many diverse membership companies at the Elders Council, and there are many more, but we're excited to see that this integrated ecosystem is so critical to look at power, heat, and hydrogen. Camilla.
Yeah, we tend to talk a lot about the supply side of the value chain, and we don't talk so much on the demand side, and maybe that also is why heat is a hidden gem. But if we start from the demand side and do the mapping, half of the need is heat, and it does not make sense to store that as electricity. So if heat is the need, the only thing that makes sense is to store that as heat. So starting the whole analysis from the demand side will help us find the most cost-effective solutions in the value chain.
Yeah, I mean, every time I get to a discussion, what's the best technology, I say, what's the best means of transportation? Is it a car, a plane, a train? Depends what you want to do, where you want to get, and what you need. And I think it's also true for us. There are different technologies. Maybe we could start to do some carbon reduction with just a few, but if you want to get to net zero, we have to be very diversified to get to the flexibility that we need, and we have to use a very nice and wide mix of technologies.
Yeah, but maybe one of the reflections around that siloed thinking that we have in our energy system is that typically power models optimize on an hourly basis with, let's say, power demand only, right? So, and of course, power now is coupled to hydrogen through electrolysis, so you also have hydrogen in those power models. But heat was always this other entity, right? We solved that with coal or gas, and heat didn't really figure into those hourly energy models. So the council now, together with us this year, for the first time, at least also for us the first time, created this hourly model that integrates power, heat, and hydrogen and optimizes the different forms of flexibility. And I think that tech-agnostic view is only feasible if you analyze the energy system in the right way, which is namely an integrated energy system. And I think that the council brings a really unique view now into that integration of the energy system rather than trying to solve for the system in silos.
And with that integrated view, we built on some de-risking policy recommendations, looking at grid charges. Are there other components that you want the audience to take away as how could we improve policies to help really implement the benefits and the diversification of thermal energy storage?
Yeah, I think not only the market is a bit late to the game here, but also regulation. And as we said, in many countries, we have to fight with regulators to let us play in the game because the regulation is written for battery storage. And then we want to play in some areas and say, but thermal energy storage is not part of the definitions. And I think we need to start to see more and more of regulation, first to enable thermal energy storage to participate, and then to see more policies and regulations that are pushing that. We are starting to see that in some countries, but we need much more of that to really bring in thermal energy storage as a significant player to the game.
I think still the de-risking and also making technology neutral incentive programs to get it going. I think that is important. Right. Then of course also the COP27 here, there's a lot of focus also on developing countries. And this integrated system approach is also opening up for those kind of solutions in microgrid systems that can be deployed. But then of course it has to be affordable for everybody. So
maybe they're really emphasizing again that this is cooling and heating, so hot and cold. Yeah. Because if I think about the developing world where you have that cooling need going forward, and if we actually get all that cooling need built out because of economic development, you get such peaks in power systems that becomes very difficult, unaffordable, and dirty, because often those peaks are still provided in dirty ways. So what are the ways that you can actually make such cooling needs also feasible, affordable, clean with thermal energy storage? Is I think another real area of opportunity, and frankly more cooling needs for buildings than heating needs if you take it in today's world, and particularly going forward.
Well, no, and thank you for really focusing that this is developing many different communities around the world that really have a need and an opportunity to work with thermal energy storage. And to points earlier about really being efficient in the process, and whether you're really taking the waste here, the cooling and heating, just make an integral part so you can be as efficient as possible. I think it's really important. Camilla, do you want to speak any more about any other policy recommendations or takeaways that were important to you?
I think in the most mature energy market, there are flexibility module systems put in place, so which works. So those could be amplified and developed broader. And of course, an obvious one is that if we want to decarbonize through electrification, we cannot put the burden on grid tariffs on that. So somehow that needs to be, we need to find the right balance so we really incentivize electrification.
We also get to many points when customer says, listen, grid charging is nice, electrification is nice, but it's not green, because in many countries around the world, the grid is not clean enough yet. But also there, I think we need more vision, like we do with electrical cars, and we say, okay, we're going to electrify the cars, and we'll get there in terms of the percentage of renewables in the grid. We have to do the same here, and consider grid charging, because not in every place you can install a PV field or a wind farm. Also, let grid charging be at least part of the game and still be considered as a decarbonization of heat.
And I'm glad you're highlighting and echoing the mission and the vision of the Council, is how we amplify the message of how we meet our global decarbonization goals with long-duration energy storage, both power and heat. It's essential, and how we create the broader marketplace to give all the benefits is that we're working on today. And there's a question from the audience. Oh, go ahead, Doron.
Yeah, maybe just one thing to build on this measurement of carbon intensity of grids, right? And that's a theme that we see in 24/7 clean PPAs in May. Right, so how do we actually measure what actually is a firm PPA? We see it in green hydrogen. What's the definition of green hydrogen, right? And we see it now here as well in green heat. So I think that there's an opportunity here on the heat side to almost make sure that we, let's say, take and hitch a ride on some of those other conversations so that we can start to integrate that, what is a clean electron, making sure that our heat is itself a source of clean energy.
So you're hearing themes of integration and flexibility and de-risking, and how thermal energy storage is here today. There are many types of projects that are commercially available, and we can only bring more benefits as we scale up. And there's efficiency to waste energy, heat, and district heating, and we have business cases to build from. So we see the excitement and the interest and just some of the aha moments. As we're closing out the panel today, I'd love to hear from each of you. What's one key takeaway that you want everyone to be, singing praise about it, thermal energy storage, that you hear as a mantra throughout COP27?
I would like to emphasize that technology is available and capital is available. So there is, it's time for action, basically.
So act now, thermal energy storage.
Yeah, I want to build on that and say, we are ready. We are ready. I hear a lot of people saying, well, it's not there. We are ready. We invite you all to come, to see, to kick the tires. and to implement, because I think the name of the game now is to start to implement. No more discussions about just goals, but to go ahead to try new things. Yeah, you might fail, but you also might succeed, so you better try, and we invite all of the listeners here to come and talk to us, all of us, and try and implement, and let us move this vision forward.
So we're working together to de-risk the transition. We're available today. We can start small. We can scale up fast. We can show you the economics to demonstrate the enormous benefits, and we can really kind of continue to build on the partnerships. Math?
Yeah, and I think it's here, it's now. Why not action? And I think this with the de-risking and the incentives, that is the last piece in the puzzle that maybe hold people a bit back. So if that also could come in, I think it really commercialize and scale fast. So, yeah.
So scaling and really kind of bringing together the conversations that it's here today.
Mm. Maybe the fact that right now you have I call it tailwind, which is a bit of a strange framing, but you almost have these gas prices now at such levels that starting to couple renewables with thermal storage to decarbonize and push gas out of our systems, it becomes not just decarbonization, but it's also an energy security. So in a world where you're pushing energy security, think of thermal energy storage as a way to really accelerate that. And it may not be a business case in every application and every geography, but right now you can pick and choose the ones where it makes sense, right? So make sure you look at the business cases that we describe and think of to what extent is that relevant in my environment, in my geography, and then really scale in those settings, right? Don't scale in settings where there is no economic business case. Scale where it makes sense.
Scale where it makes sense. Thermal energy storage is here today. There's tons of opportunities with long duration energy storage. Going back to our first three questions of what we wanted the panel to ask, why is this important to you? Why thermal energy storage? How are we addressing heat decarbonization? What new takeaways are there? Are there any other elements that you want to add to making sure that we continue the conversation that this is just the beginning of more insight to thermal energy storage? Is there anything you want to add to making sure that those three questions were answered?
It is such a big part of the problem. We saw how much of the CO2 it contributes to. And it is a fairly simple solution, which is available today. So if it's applied correctly, it can really accelerate the overall energy transition.
I like the quote, don't call industry in general hard to abate, right? Because hard to abate is very much gradual, right? And there are parts of industry which are not hard to abate.
Exactly.
So it's, I think, a really nice, don't say it's too hard too soon.
Don't give up. We know it's possible. We've all been sponges today, absorbing all this great information, and we can store it for many hours, many days, many months, many years, and firming up power and heat. I mean, it's thrilling to see. And congratulations to the council members and to McKinsey on a really important report showing the cost savings, showing the capacity, showing the market that's there, and that again that it's possible we can scale up today. Thank you all very much for your time and efforts and for the ongoing commitment to really demonstrating how we can scale up long duration energy storage. Wanted to share with all of you, how you can kind of continue conversations with us and reach out to us on next steps. Signing up today, you saw that we have a website and we're online. There are other ways that you can reach us. It's not working. Yeah, but there we go. Nope. Voila. So showing you again that you can get involved, you can reach out to all of us, continue the conversation. Again, this is just beginning to really demonstrate the enormous value add of long duration energy storage, firming power, firming heat, the diversity of technologies that are available in the marketplace today, the fact that you can really have this be addressed to providing societal benefit, the scaling up is huge. And there's just enormous opportunity. So thank you all again for taking the time. Thank you for your questions. And again, this is just beginning to continue to talk about long duration energy storage. You can follow us on Twitter, online, and then again, have a wonderful time at COP27. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.